Hello, world. Welcome to the Rod and Rain Show. This is Al Rod.
And Lady Rain here. This week's episodes are going to be a little different because we're actually looking at all of Rusty Cundiff and Darren Scott's horror anthology movies because, of course, Tales from the Hood 3 is a part of a trilogy of anthologies, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then they also released American Nightmares the same year they released Tales from the Hood 2. And they're all a combination of horror tales, so I thought it would be kind of cool to just first take each movie individually and talk about the stories within that movie and rank them about how we felt they were in quality and horror and theme and just ranking them per movie. And then after we've gotten through all the movies, we'll then rank all four of the horror anthology movies and see which one did it best. So we're going to start with Tales from the Hood 3 tonight.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I believe tonight's episode, I get to start us off.
Yep.
As usual, we don't share our rankings with each other before we do these conversations. So I'm very interested to see what Rod has to say about where these movies went on his list. I feel like I might surprise him with where I put some of these stories.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where you land because we've had previous discussions about, all of these movies before, and I thought I had kind of an idea of where you were with everything. So I'm kind of interested to see what kind of swerves you might throw at me.
Yeah, I don't think you'll be shocked at like how I begin with my bottom, but I think you might be a little shocked as I get closer to the top. Now, this is only five stories. We did note the actual titles of the stories and who was responsible for like the main writing of the story. So that I did take into some consideration in my ranking. Well, I didn't take who wrote it in consideration, but I did find it interesting whose movies ended up in the top and who's ended up in the bottom on my list. Because there is kind of a trend there.
Okay.
So to begin, so again, five stories. There are four stories in this movie, and then the wraparound story is what we're considering the fifth story. So my number five is Ruby Gates.
Ruby Gates is your number five. Okay.
Ruby Gates is my number five. We kind of nicknamed these stories before we knew the actual names of each story, so we kind of know it as like the apartments. Yeah. Like as our reminder of like what story was that. And it's at the bottom to me, like just straight from my notes, I wrote just boring. Ruby Gates it was slow to me. It dragged on for too long. The horror wasn't really horrifying to me. Yeah, I didn't like the dialogue. I just felt like this was one of two stories that were the closest to being a tale from the hood to me. And I feel like if you're going to focus on like, kind of this rundown apartment building that's being taken over to be gentrified, I just thought the horror could have just hit a lot harder with that theme of gentrification. I feel like gentrification could have been like the villain of that horror story, and it could have just been so much stronger, but instead it was just full of bad effects, unnatural dialogue, and just dry and slow.
Yeah, the fire effects throughout that story I noticed were pretty damn terrible. And the basketball when it's bouncing.
That basketball was terrible.
Yeah.
The fire was terrible.
Yeah, I'll get into more what my gripes were once I hit it on my list, but I can't disagree with a single thing you said.
Yeah, it's at the bottom for me because it starts out, it's the first story after the wraparound intro. And for that to be the story that starts us off and you're already so bored, it makes it hard for you to want to like stick around and keep watching. because I know like this time, I mean, we watched it in the middle of the day, so it was able to, we were able to get through it. But like I remember there's a time we put it on to watch, to talk about it before, and we put it on like, at evening time, bedtime, and you fall asleep on the first story. You fall asleep on Ruby Gates because it's just that dry. And I'm like, it's all supposed to be a horror movie. Like, you should be afraid to fall asleep damn near, And it's like, it's so dry and slow and just uninteresting that we dozed off and was like, we'll just finish this tomorrow. Like,
I remember.
And we wouldn't do that on some of the other stories, I don't think. I mean, I feel like you could probably say that about a lot of these stories, but that story to start it off, I think it's the driest out of all the stories in Tales 3. The slowest and the most boring.
Okay.
So that's why I put it in my 5th spot, because it did nothing for me.
Okay.
Like, and how you can have like a kid with cancer in a story and it still does nothing for me, like, says a lot.
Yeah.
The makeup on the kid was terrible. I know that has nothing to do with story, but I just don't know where their budget went on this movie. Whatever budget they did have, because the kid looked green. Like, the effects were terrible. The dialogue was so bad to me in that one.
Yeah,
the dialogue was so. I'm like, it just didn't even, like, conversations don't work that way.
Yeah, man.
And I'm gonna throw it out there. Ruby Gates is a Darren story, so I'm just gonna throw that out there as a note. So just keep that in mind. But Ruby Gates was noted as written by Darren Scott. So there's that. But yeah, so it's my number 5.
Yeah, I feel you on that, and it very well could be interchangeable with my number 5. But for me, I chose Mouths of Babes and Demons as my number 5, the wraparound story. There are elements of it that are creepy. Tony Todd just brings a presence that automatically just puts you in a mode of discomfort, and you don't feel secure about what's going on throughout the wraparound as it develops. But I think as a framing device for the rest of the movie, it is by far the weakest wraparound story we've had out of all the Tales from the Hood movies. It just feels so disjointed from the rest of it. And like, I feel like a wraparound really should function to at least attempt to frame the rest of what we're seeing in an effective way. Now, I know in Tales from the Hood 2, some of how the tales delivered to the Robo Patriot, it just feels so incongruent with the purpose of telling those tales. But it, they attempted to kind of make that connection, whereas with Tales from the Hood 3, it's just so, all the tales are so arbitrarily just thrown out, and it's like, I don't get it. It's like, why? I just want to tell you stories. And that's why it's at number 5 for me. I'm not saying it doesn't have elements that are creepy or anything. I just think as a framing device, it was not effective, and it didn't do what I feel like a wraparound is supposed to do in a Tales from the Hood movie. So, yeah.
I'm gonna keep my comments to myself on that one because it's not my number 5.
Okay.
But I can see why it's your number 5. That makes sense. I mean, I will say it is probably the weakest of the wraparounds. So I don't think you're wrong there. But I'm gonna keep the rest of my comments to myself on that one for now. My number 4. Operatic.
Okay.
Operatic is a story of a chick who can barely sing, but they want us to think she can sing.
Yeah.
She gets scouted by this guy who claims he's an up-and-coming manager, and she needs money until she, makes it big. So he's like, hey, I know this old rich opera singer who can't take care of herself. She'll pay you to just sit and watch opera with her all day or something. And it turns out they're like, I don't think they're vampires, but apparently they're body snatchers. Well, we'll put it that way. And she's been very patient, waiting for the perfect instrument within a young lady whose body she could then possess and revive her opera career because it was cut short in her youth. It's just dumb. It was not a Tale from the Hood. Nowhere near the hood.
I agree.
Wasn't as boring as Ruby Gates, but
No.
it did nothing for me. I don't know what the message was supposed to be for that one. Just,
That's
chasing the fountain of youth. I don't know what we were supposed to get out of that. Like, I feel like Tales from the Hood, at least from what we know from the first Tales from the Hood movie, like, these tales are supposed to give you some sort of social message, but framed in the genre of horror.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to get some social commentary out of Tales from the Hood tales. That's my understanding of Tales from the Hood. I don't know the social commentary we were supposed to get out of Operatic.
I'll throw out what I think is possibly being worked in there when I get to it on my list.
Okay. Because to me right now, I'm just like,
yeah, we
what people will do to get money. Because, I mean, I did leave out a part, like they did,
Yeah, I was gonna say it's
like,
more. I think it's more related to that.
to that part.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay, possibly. I was thinking that, but I'm like, that's still.
No, I hear you. It's kind of thin.
It's still weak to me.
Yeah,
Like, you're grasping.
it's a little thin.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider themes that
are in the
they've
first
worked
tales
with before.
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of thin.
Yeah. It's
Kinda
like,
low
this is a
stakes.
story you told to be the vehicle for a social commentary on the things people will do for money. Like,
Yeah.
you could have told a different story and given us that message a lot stronger. So yeah, it's number 4 on my list because it fell flat. The message was thin. It wasn't a hood tale. Just no. I will give it. I will give it. I like to try to give kudos where I can. I did like that they had Lynn Whitfield in that story. I always am happy to see her get work. She's a legend to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was happy to see that they were able to get a name like her in there, on top of Tony Todd and the wraparound. But so I don't have a problem with her performance or anything. But the story, it's just unfortunate that that's the story they put her in.
So my number 4 is actually I surprised myself putting this here because this was one I used to like a lot more in our previous viewings, but watching it today, I realized maybe The Bunker is thematically solid. Like, I love what it's saying, but it gets to a point where you're just watching this character do these rants, and I just feel like it goes on longer than necessary because the point is well made within like 6-7 minutes into this, and I just feel like it continues to drag as if we don't have enough evidence that this man is just this racist with all this backwards ass thinking. We see it for what it is, and then I just think it stretches out for too long. And I love the conclusion of it, where we see that there are all these people just kind of just observing him. It made me like wish that we were closer to a world that was like this, where we just kind of look at these people as relics of the past, because one thing I really love about it is it just exposes how animalistic and low level thinking the racist mindset is, and how, at its very nature, at its core, it is just some very unevolved type shit. Like, these people are, they're almost subhuman in the way they look at the world, because of, it's just crazy. Like, at its core, racism is completely illogical. It is insane, and it is barbaric. And you see this guy, and he's like the barest form of racist that cannot be socialized, and at its core, that's what it is. I mean, you are not an evolved person. You're just very far behind, and there is a point to watching him do his thing for that long and exposing that for all it is. I just think it got to a point where some of it started to get a little redundant. But the more I kind of talk it out, it's like maybe I have it a little too low.
That's why I've been sitting here so quietly, because I have it at number 3.
Yeah,
on my list.
Maybe I have it a little too low.
For a lot of the reasons you just stated.
Yeah.
It's not higher on my list, but I did put it at the middle.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was a very clever way to portray like what racism should really be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it should be something that is an exhibit, because it's just so outlandish, or so like it's like this anomaly or something was like, or like they had it identified as like an endangered species.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yes, that's how it should be treated, that there are very few of these left and they're almost extinct, and we have them here for
like,
you to look at. But I do agree that the rants went on too long. That's why I didn't make it up higher, because I did feel like it dragged on for a bit too long, and it just started getting weird.
Yeah, it got weird.
It got weird, and I'm like, okay, I felt like we were kind of straying from like the heart of like a racist after a while. I was like, okay, where are we going here? Like, it started merging into like a few other little things.
Yeah.
I was like, let's keep it just the American racist. Okay, we keep it there.
Are you referring more so to when you started to do that shit with the blow up dolls?
Yeah, the dolls and the poster, and I'm like, okay, now we're like, all right, we're getting into some like chauvinistic stuff in there and all of that, and there was clearly, I wouldn't have thought much of it, but at the like end of that story, the kids were like, can we go to the male chauvinist exhibit next? Mm-hmm. And the teacher was like, oh, we got about 20 minutes left, so if we move quick. So it's like there's an exhibit for that. Yeah. So it's like some of what he was doing could have been in the exhibit they were about to go to.
Yeah.
For me. So that was what really just triggered the thought, where I'm like, okay, we could have probably cut some of what he was doing, and it could have been another exhibit of another group of people that should be looked at as an endangered species. But
I think there's some overlap.
The blow up doll part was fine, because it was a black blow up doll.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a problem with that. But like the poster and the way he was all with the old girl in the red, white, and blue poster and stuff, like that could have probably been in the male chauvinist exhibit. But the black blow up doll part.
Yeah, because it's like
because we're their dolls. They're like, they want to dominate black women like that. They will fetishize us all day.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
For their satisfaction. But
like, they have the hatred there, but they have like a repressed sexual
like
fascination.
Yes, so that part made sense to me, the way he was with the doll.
Yeah.
But I did put it at 3 because I felt like some of it just went on. It got a little weird. And then I did have, this is probably like just nitpicky, but then I did write down the question of just like, how are they observing this exhibit when they're like outside the bubble and he's inside a bunker? So I'm like, is he up on a screen or something for them to see what he's doing, or are they just hearing him? Like, it's not clear how that exhibit works for them to all be standing outside this force field looking at his bunker. but the whole story pretty much took place inside his bunker. So I'm like, how are they seeing what he's doing? Like, I could understand him talking. They probably hear him on the loudspeaker. Yeah. But I'm just like, is there some screen or something they're watching to see everything he's doing in there? Gotcha. So that was just a question I had of like, are they just standing out there listening to him? Yeah. And staring at his bunker? Or can they see him being racist inside his bunker? Yeah. Or is that just for us as viewers? So that was the only like kind of question I had. So I left it at the middle. But I did like that story. Still not a hood story per se. Still not a Tales from the Hood for me. But it is a theme and barrier or experience that those in the hood or everywhere people of color face. So it is a theme that's relevant to the hood. Yeah. So I was able to put it at number 3.
Okay. My number 3, I again surprised myself, but I put Ruby Gates at number 3, which is higher than
I am shocked.
I would have thought I would put there. And it's mainly because I feel like the first fourth to maybe half of it is actually okay. I was kind of just willing to, I don't know what it was today. I was just willing to kind of go along with this character and his ambition to just kind of move up and cover his own ass, even though, I mean, he's despicable as hell. But with Tales from the Hood, you kind of get invested in despicable people getting their comeuppance by the close of the story. Right. I think what really just doesn't work and just persists to not work for me every time I rewatch this is the family in the apartment. They're not acted well
at all. Oh my gosh, it was.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the dialogue was just really clunky and unnatural, and it was really written so that those characters, they're designed only for you to sympathize with them and not to really connect with them as human beings. Right. They're like, every single moment is just
you're supposed to just feel sad.
It's supposed to be so sweet and endearing, and it's just like it was just too much. I'm like, you're laying it on just a little too damn thick, and
yeah, it was just so. It was very inauthentic.
It really was. It's like you are trying way too hard to make me sympathize with these people, and I feel like I should just be naturally connecting with them. So when the fire finally happens and, you know, tragedy strikes, I was left cold because it's a terrible thing to say because this poor boy has cancer and everything.
That's what I mean. It's like you're supposed to feel bad for this, but to me, like the story it took so damn long that I was like, like hurry up and just kill him. Like, good lordy. Like I was just waiting for the investor or whatever. I'm like, when are we getting to the die part? Like it was just taking so long.
When he finally gets back to the apartments, it really just starts to drag because you're just waiting for the inevitable. It's like he has these visions of this family haunting him. He picks up the phone. He keeps hearing the basketball, and we're just like, just take the story where it's gonna go.
Right, like and then they're throwing in all these like antics when he's back at the apartments, and it's like we got the basketball, and he goes in the apartment, and then there's the clown in the cloud. I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like,
and you know what I was thinking?
I felt like the family should have been more haunting than like the apartments themselves as the haunt.
And what I was thinking in that is you have this long stretch of just waiting for whatever's going to end him, basically.
Right.
And I was just thinking about how in the first Tales from the Hood, I mean, we kind of have a similar setup with Duke Medgar, where we're just kind of waiting for the dolls to kind of do their thing. Mm-hmm. But there's visual intrigue
in
seeing the doll. And there's interesting build-up. And even though you know he's gonna get it. You're interested to see how,
Right.
and you have the unique addition of just the dolls and seeing how they pull off the effect and everything.
Right.
Whereas
You got this man haunted by a basketball.
you have poorly done CGI basketball, and horrible fire effects, and it's just like it just doesn't even live up to what they did 20 years ago.
And then he becomes a murderer to avoid becoming an accomplice to murder. I'm like, what? Yeah. I am really shocked because this also means that one of my bottom movies is one of your top movies, and I'm just like, how?
Yeah.
That's crazy. So I'm just going. I don't know if you finished with that one. I'm just sitting here like, wow, I didn't. This list is probably going to be our biggest separation of rankings that we've had so far.
Yeah, I think the only reason I entertained putting it above The Bunker is because The Bunker to me is just, it feels a little more low effort because most of that story is just this guy ranting inside a bunker. And I mean, that is literally all there is to it.
But then you get to the end of that story and you see the reveal of like, it's not just a man ranting in his bunker. It's like a dude he's
on display.
Zoo. He's on display in a zoo. And it's like, because they called it a zoo. It's not like a museum or something. It's like, it was called like the Central Zoo or something. And they were asking like, and because he comes out the bunker mad that these people are watching him and tries to shoot them because, of course, this is also a racist who loves his guns.
Yeah.
And because he's in a force field, it ricochets and kills him. And the kids are like, oh, man, it already said he was an endangered species. They're like, is he extinct? And the teacher's like, oh, there might be another one at the Mississippi Zoo or whatever. So it's like they're putting these racists in zoos.
Yeah. And
we know zoos to be for putting animals on display. And I just loved that. So
no, it was a great reveal.
I feel like the effort was there more so for the reveal and like the thoughtfulness of that. Outside of, he's just in a bunker ranting, but then all of the effort and thought went into the reveal and the situation around him in the bunker.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, number 2. My number 2 is Dope Kicks.
Okay.
Which surprised me because it's usually one that I was putting down there of Ruby Gates. Mm-hmm. But in watching it today, it connected to the hood to me because he's like an inner city thief.
Yeah, his whole mentality is hood.
Yeah, and he's getting his karma by being cursed to live whatever outcome he has bestowed upon his latest victim is the outcome that is now locked in for him. And unknowingly to him, his most recent victim, he thought he was just kind of, knocking him out to steal his shoes and rob him. Didn't realize that when he knocked him out, he didn't get up. Mm-hmm. And so now the latest victim is dead, and he's got to live the death of his latest victim because of the curse that was set on him because of the victim before that who like went on the news or whatever. I don't know. I just thought it was a really interesting way to make karma horror. Mm-hmm. That was like the note I put down was just like, karma is all, everyone, like what goes around comes around. You give what you get, what you dish out, whatever. But I just thought it was kind of a nice hood tailish way to represent karma, to kind of make those who are considering that lifestyle or living that lifestyle like, hey, what you are doing to your people in your community can come back and get you.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a nice, supernaturally horrific way to portray, like, hey, think before you act, type thing. I don't know. I also liked, like the attention that they put into, like, hey, they got the steps of death right. Like, like everything that I just know about, like, a dying body. I'm like, hey, the curse, worked through him in the order of, like, what happens to an actual body when it dies. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was just a nice attention to detail there. I thought that was well done compared to some of the efforts put into the other stories. Yeah. Because that could have been something that they could have slipped up and messed up, had something happen wrong or whatever. But I did like that they paid that attention to detail. I don't know. I liked the resolution, so to speak, of that story, to where he had to truthfully be repentant of what he did, beg for forgiveness, if he wanted to get out of this. And getting out of this for him really would have meant going to hell. But that was his better option than forever being demonized by the chaperones who were trying to take him to hell anyway. Mm-hmm. Like, the better option was for him to get it over with, let your body be at peace, so to speak, and send your spirit to hell. Or you're walking around in purgatory going through the steps of death for all eternity. Mm-hmm. And I liked that that was a part of his resolution. It's like, accept your fate. You're not getting out of this in a way that's desirable to you. Mm-hmm. But there is a lesser of two evils, so to speak, if you are truly sorry for what you did. And he's trying to go fix it, but of course it's too late. And so now he's kind of just stuck. Or I don't know if he is stuck, because she was doing the autopsy or whatever, and it's like, does that kill him and send him to hell?
Yeah, it was unclear based on how it ended,
because he didn't get to ask for forgiveness, but he's also being affected by the autopsy to his body. So I'm like, is that killing him?
Yeah. He looked officially? Like at the end, it looked like he completely faded out. So I didn't know what to make of that.
Yeah, and it looked like the little demon chaperones were like pulling at his spirit while he was laying there. So that piece is not clear. So I don't know if he ended up in hell or not, but I just liked the portrayal of karma as this supernatural life through death experience, and that it felt like a tale from the hood. I appreciated, like, finally having a damn hood tale in a movie called Tales from the Hood 3.
I know.
So that's why I put it at 2.
Okay. And I completely understand your reasoning. My number 2 is operatic. And
I am so baffled, y'all. If you could see my face, because I thought we were both gonna have those in the bottom.
Look, man, look.
So you like Darren's stories more than I do. You have both of his stories higher than I do.
It's not that I like the stories. I feel like I have a lot of shit to sift through, and I just gotta find a place where they fit. Because this story...
Yeah, please tell me.
This story is very derivative.
Yes.
I don't think it's very original.
Nope.
But
it's number 2, so please tell us why.
At the very least, I had something I could cling to in the story. Like, this is not a tale from the hood at all. This is not something I would want to see in this movie. But, I mean, it established a character that I could connect with, and it was the girl.
Shayla?
It's like, I could at least connect with, okay, this girl has this desire.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, I don't have any of that in any of the other stories. It was like the first story where it's like, okay, this is like a human character who has desires, ambitions. That gives me something to ride with at the very least. And I think where it goes, isn't all that interesting. It's something that's been done before,
Right.
but it had some freaky imagery. Lynn Whitfield, I think, had this very wicked presence that just
I
worked.
feel like she does Wicked so well.
Yeah,
though. She just has the face of like just this black witch to me.
Yeah,
And you can always cast her in some supernaturally evil role, and she's gonna nail it.
yeah, and she doesn't have to necessarily do much to fit the part.
It's just her face.
She just kind of has these subtle faces that she makes that just adds
And her
to, like,
delivery,
holy shit, that's
yeah.
evil.
Because I think of like Eve's Bayou, I think of this, I
Yeah.
think of Thin Line. It's like she just.
Yeah. The creepiest moment in that story is when I wish I could remember her character's name, but when she's
Miss. It's like a Frenchy sounding name.
Benoit
or something like that. Yeah.
But the girl.
Shayla.
Yeah, when Shayla goes up to the mic and she's trying to sing and nothing is coming out, and they cut the Lynn Whitfield just demonic ass looking facial expression.
Yes. Looking up.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's
Miss Benoit was her name.
Benoit, okay.
Was Lynn Whitfield's name.
Okay, yeah. Miss Benoit was creepy as hell in the story. But yeah, I mean, it just had something I could like
I am so shocked right now.
Yeah, and I'm not like saying it's like over the top good or anything.
Yeah, you started out with like it's derivative.
It is.
It's nothing special.
It's very.
But it's number 2.
It's very derivative, but it's like I don't know. It was like a story that attempted to have some decent character work at the very least. Not saying it executed it all that well, but it was an attempt. Like, because I felt like I was just cold with everything else up until that point. I'm like, where are the characters? Like, where? Yeah, I don't know. I will say at the end, like, I'm not confused or conflicted about anything, but I wasn't sure what Darren wanted me to feel about any of it. Like, because...
Well, you said you had an idea of what the message was for this. Because when I said I had it at 4, I was like, what was the social commentary or message? Yeah. And you said you'd get to it when it came up on your list.
Yeah, I mean...
Please tell me.
You see Shayla she's very sociopathic and like... She has no... I mean, she's hesitant. Like, she's like, are you killer? Are you sure about this? Like, she's not jumping on it immediately.
But once you give her, like, some reasoning on, like, how it could work,
yeah,
she's like, oh, yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Like, reassure her that it could work out.
So you sure we can do it? This is how it would go? And she, like, jumps on board. And I think, that's what seals her fate, is just, that sociopathic nature that rests within her, and she just needed a circumstance to bring it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, did she get what she deserved in the end? Yeah, because I mean, essentially, even though she didn't know what the hell Miss Benoit was, I mean, she was under the assumption she killed this woman, which was fucked up. But I think this was the first story where everybody was kind of despicable. Like, you don't feel like anybody necessarily got what they deserved because Miss Benoit is just stealing youth from everyone.
Until that body ages too.
So it's like, it was a weird story to be included in the Tales from the Hood story because it doesn't fit the typical structure, in my opinion. Because
you're right.
I think Rusty had noted that typically, in speaking strictly of the first Tales from the Hood, I mean, his goal was to, present an issue and have someone afflicted, but then you have this supernatural intervention that works on behalf of the afflicted to bend the situation towards something more just. And I think in what's the name of the story? Operatic. I mean, Miss Benoit isn't innocent, so it's like I was kind of left feeling like morally. I guess I was confused. I was morally confused. Like, what am I supposed to make of that? And that's uh, I think that's what contributes to your sense of what the fuck am I supposed to get out of this?
Yes,
What is it saying?
yes.
Yeah. So
And that's why I put it at 4, because I was just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, why did we need that in Tales from the Hood?
Yeah. And what is it ultimately saying? If everything's bad.
Yeah.
Like if they're all bad, like Miss Benoit and
But you have it.
old dude are not innocents.
You have it at number 2.
And Shayla wasn't an innocent.
She wasn't either, no.
So, yeah.
This is going to probably be the shocker of the evening.
Go ahead.
My number 1 is The Mouths of Babes and Demons.
Okay.
The wraparound story is my number 1, and it is for one reason only.
Okay.
Because I wholeheartedly agreed with you when you said it's not a great framing device or vehicle for the rest of the tales.
It's the worst.
Because even like Tales from the Hood 1 and 2 and American Nightmares, like all of those tales and all of those stories had some sort of connection to the wraparound. They served the purpose of the wraparound. You could see why they were included as a tale in reference to with the wraparound story.
Yeah.
This Tales from the Hood 3 wraparound, other than it's a kid telling a guy scary stories, like how they were really connected to the wraparound, like there was no connected theme or purpose. Mm-hmm. So I will agree with you on that completely. Mm-hmm. The only reason it is number 1 for me, it was actually the most horrific story to me in here. Mm-hmm. And it's because one of my biggest fears, biggest nightmares, like the scariest shit to me is how easily kids can be convinced to and end up taken. Mm-hmm. Like, those stories scare me all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, it's always my greatest fear that just, you find one convincing adult who's like, your mommy told me to pick you up because she's, like, kids are innocent. Mm-hmm. And it is the most terrifying thought to me. It scares the shit out of me. So it was just the horror element of, it's this guy who, I mean, of course we know this isn't like a regular little girl. She's turns out to be the devil's helper or something. So that part makes sense, like she ain't really a little kid, but like in my brain, like the whole movie you're watching it, like this guy just went and picked up this kid from school and convinced her that she was supposed to go with him, and you find out that he's like a kid murderer, and it was just terrifying to me. Yeah. And I just think that because it's supposed to be a horror anthology, it did the best job at scaring me or unsettling me. Mm-hmm. And that's why I put it as number 1. Had nothing to do with like it being the wraparound, how it connected to the tales. It was just the content and the topic of that wraparound was just the most it gave me the most unsettling thoughts. So therefore it served its purpose as being a horror story the best to me out of all of these, and that's why I made it number 1. Okay. It made me the most uncomfortable because it made me have thoughts that I did not enjoy having.
Yeah, well, yeah. In your case, that's a more subjective experience, and I can't really.
Yeah, like for me, it just is like, oh man, I'd be terrified. Like if my kid just got picked up by a stranger because it's so convincing, and it just made me feel all queasy inside. And like every time I watch it, that story, my brain automatically goes to like how he just went and picked that kid up from school, even though he gets his whatever at the end. She gets her payback, and he's actually dying and getting, all the kids' lives he's taking. But like in my mind, I'm like, how many kids did he do that? Like terrified me. Just a terrifying thought of like if I showed up at school and my kid wasn't there and someone like all of that just takes me down a rabbit hole every time that story starts, and then I'm just like uncomfortable. Yeah. And so because it made me feel that way, that's why I put it at number one, because no other story had horror elements in it that really made me uncomfortable, scared me, creeped me out. There wasn't a lot of horror compared to how the wraparound story made me feel. So that's why I made it at the top.
Okay. Yeah.
Compared to you having it at the bottom, like yeah, I could completely see why you have it at the bottom.
Yeah,
if you take my like unsettling and stuff out of it, yes, it did. It was a terrible wraparound.
It was awful.
It didn't connect to the tales at all. But as far as
like considering what the wraparound is, or considering what it functioned as in previous Tales from the Hood movies, it was just not a good framing device. It did. Yeah. I don't think it did its job sufficiently. Yeah. And that was the criteria I judged it upon, just based on what wraparound stories had always been up to that point. So yeah, like I never said it wasn't creepy or anything. Right. Like it, it definitely has its elements of it. It has elements there that are scary, but considering what the wraparound story typically functioned as in a Tales from the Hood movie, I felt like it just fell short.
For me, because again, when I do my rankings, I try to establish my criteria of how I'm ranking it. So my criteria here, like one of my criteria was like the quality of the horror elements, because it's supposed to be a horror anthology. So the scarier a tale is to me, the more points I'd give it for that specific category. Mm-hmm. And so that's what really just won it out for me on number one, because it was like the only story that scared me. The wraparound was the only one that scared me. Yeah. And it was only because like you said, of me bringing in my subjective piece. Yeah. Like, yeah. I mean, it was still scary, like, on its own. Like, even if I didn't have kids or think that. Like, I mean, it's still a scary thought, a dude kidnapping kids and beheading them.
Oh, yeah, that's probably the most...
Is a very horrific storyline.
That's probably the most disturbing thing that's been in any of the movies. Yeah, like, the fact, even though we don't physically see him do it, the fact that it cements in the end that this dude was serially doing it.
And had them buried down there.
Yeah,
like that...
That's probably one of the worst things anyone's done.
Yes, and it's just it's a scary ass thought on top of he kidnaps the kids, like as my whole personal horror element of like, what the fuck? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, my number one is Trump Shoes,
also known as Dope Kicks.
Dope Kicks. It's number one because of a lot of the stuff that you brought up previously, honestly. Even though I guess you said the wraparound was the only one that scared you. Not that this tale scared me or anything, but I think it was, out of the main stories, it was the one that was more closely attempting to fit the mold of what they were doing from the first Tales from the Hood, I guess. I could see this kind of fitting that a little more. Okay. And I felt like they were starting to come back to form coming into this one. Yeah. And when you see him punching people out and just taking their shit, it's like, okay, I'm in a Tales from the Hood mindset looking at this tale. So, part of me did appreciate that, and then I found some of the imagery in this one was a little frightening. I think the artistic choice for the demon was an interesting one. Yeah, like that came like very much out of
face.
That came so out of left field, but I liked it a lot.
They remind me of something else I've seen, but it's slipping my mind what the movie was. If I remember it before we're done, I'll bring it up.
Yeah, without really scaring me, I think this tale had a lot of cool imagery. Some of it even brought me back to brought me back to the Crazy K story. There was one moment where I actually thought they were going to directly reference that. When they wheel him in and you see these people in like all the red coming up, like looking at him. I thought it was gonna be. I thought they were kind of gonna toy with
like the test they did the Crazy Cat.
Yeah, like I thought they were gonna I thought they were gonna directly reference a lot of it, but they didn't. And I think it would have been interesting, considering that this tale did include angels and demons and shit.
And a sense of purgatory.
Yeah, I thought it would have presented more of a linkage to that, which would have been interesting because there was so much potential to do that, and they don't even touch it
at all.
But it would have been really interesting. But yeah, I was just really into this tale visually. I felt like visually it had a lot of interesting horror compositions, and I don't know why I want to call her Voodoo Lady,
but the lady who did the curse.
Yeah, the lady who did the curse. She was really good in this. Like she was a good fit for just adding to that vibe.
Right.
So yeah, it's like this story starts really silly and campy, but it starts getting really disturbing in the last half, and I felt like for that brief little bit, Tales from the Hood felt like it was kind of returning to form a little bit, and it was probably a little too late because I just felt like even with things that I liked in the previous tales leading up to that, I think on the whole, I just find a lot of them slightly lacking because either they left me apathetic or I felt they would have been more fitting in something like American Nightmares.
Yeah.
And that's really what it kind of boiled down to for me. It's like that was number one for me, honestly, because I felt like it was the only tale that merited being a Tales from the Hood.
That's why I had it at number 2. I was just like, this is like the only tale from the hood that is also appropriate for a horror anthology.
Yeah.
But it didn't scare me as much as the wraparound, which is why it made it to number 2.
Yeah. So to the initiated, to all the listeners that have seen Tales from the Hood 3, who do you agree with more? Who do you think?
Who's ranking?
Whose reasoning made more sense? I mean, I think it's obvious that my reasoning was just impeccable and hard to argue.
No.
I think Rain had a lot of holes in her logic. I
did not.
I think her reasoning for ranking Mouths and Babes at number 1 was a little too subjective, and
how you gonna tell me I can't rank the way I rank?
I think it's only logical that you.
I'm allowed to rank
it's only logical that you discount everything she said.
We don't share the same criteria when we rank.
I'm talking to the people.
My ranking made the most sense. I was objective.
No, but these are always going to be subjective. I mean, it's opinions. So.
And mine were better.
Okay. We'll let the people decide. All right. This has been Al Rob.
And Rain.
Holler at you later. Peace.